Hello, and it's good to have you join us again on the Maritime Radar. Seaports play a crucial role in global trade and transportation, serving as hubs for the import and export of goods via ships. Many seaports also handle passenger traffic, serving as embarkation and disembarkation points for cruise ships, ferries, and other passenger vessels. Seaports vary in size and capacity, ranging from small local harbors to major international shipping hubs. Large and strategically located ports can have a significant impact on regional and national economies by facilitating trade, efficiency, boosting industrialization, and providing employment opportunities. How to drive efficiency through compliance and multiplicity of functions and corruption in Nigeria's ports are some of the issues that will be on the front burner on today's show. I'm Nneoma Obi-Asualo. Maritime Anti-Corruption Network is a global business network of over 130 entities working towards the vision of a maritime industry that is free of corruption and enables fair trade to the benefit of the society at large. Established in 2011, Maritime Anti-Corruption Network comprises vessel-owning companies within the main sectors of the maritime industry and other companies in the industry, including cargo owners and service providers. MACN was created by business and remains driven by business and is today the leading anti-corruption initiative within the maritime industry. MACN also promotes the shipping industry, ensuring it drives compliance and focuses on port, ocean governance, and results. Before we get further into today's lineup on the program, let's find out the latest on maritime news.
The Executive Secretary and CEO of the Nigerian Shippers Council, Pius Akuta, has said that the Council's South-South Coordinating Overseas Stakeholders Seminar was an opportunity for clarification on the issues around the function of regulatory agencies in the port, priority areas of agencies, and overlapping functions. Represented by the South-South Coordinator of the Council, Jeremiah Okoliko, the CEO stated that government is currently addressing the challenges to the optimal utilization of the eastern ports, such as the poor access roads, decaying port infrastructure, inefficient port operation, and cumbersome clearance process and procedure, among others. Countries bordering the Black Sea have outlined an action plan to strengthen the oil spill response capabilities of the region and better protect the marine environment. Officials from Bulgaria, Georgia, Moldova, Romania, Turkey, and Ukraine developed the action plan during a workshop organized by the International Maritime Organization in Romania. The gathering also promoted the effective implementation of the International Convention on Oil Pollution Preparedness, Response and Cooperation Convention, while bolstering cooperation among countries in the region. Along with representatives from the Black Sea Commission, the countries examined the roles of key regional and international stakeholders in effective technical cooperation around oil spill response. The action plan underlined the importance of regional and sub-regional agreement and consistency in planning, especially as countries in the Black Sea region share many transboundary issues. The International Maritime Organization is asking businesses operating in the shipping and fisheries sectors to be part of the Marine Plastic Litter Global Industry Alliance, which will bring together maritime and fisheries industry leaders with the aim of developing innovative solutions to prevent and reduce ocean plastic while addressing common barriers to the uptake of technologies and alternative approaches. This initiative will build on and replace the project-specific GIA established previously under the GLO Litter project. The Marine Plastic Litter GIA is expected to include a wide spectrum of maritime stakeholders, including ship owners, ports, fishery, industry, recycling companies, technology and data providers, and class societies.
Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Maritime Radar. About 90% of world trade is transported by sea via ports, and businesses that are part of the global supply chain to a large extent rely on ports for either import or export. However, seaports are in many cases said to be the most corrupt place in the maritime value chain. Every day, vessels and cargoes enter ports, and the process involves numerous stakeholders across several jurisdictions, resulting in multiple interactions with government officials. This provides a fertile ground for corruption, where government officials in the port enjoy broad discretionary powers. The port also has an administrative monopoly over an essential public service that businesses depend on to function and prosper. This creates a breeding ground for a coercive corruption, where port officials extract bribes from companies from performing routine processes during vessel and cargo clearance. In this chat with Emmanuel Bosah, Program Director, the Convention on Business Integrity speaks on how an increase in compliance can reduce the corruption seen in Nigerian ports. Stay with us. Bosah, it's good to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start this conversation having an understanding of what a port efficiency is. And when you give us that understanding, so you'll be able to rate Nigeria in that regard.
Yes, thank you very much. So on the question of what is port efficiency, it's a function of three very important things. The first one is transparency. How transparent are your ports in terms of being able to do business? The second is the consistency in the application of rules, so that any single person using your service gets a clear understanding of what to expect and the time frame it takes to make things happen. And then the third thing that's very important is the predictability in time and cost of doing business at the ports. Because ultimately, it's about time that determines the cost of doing business in our port, because you need to quickly transit from entry to exit so you can be able to get to selling to your customers. So that is what we define as port efficiency. Now, of course, we're challenged with that in our environment, and that's where we are trying to do our best to support that progress around port efficiency.
We have a new Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy.
Yes.
So, and it's critical that we are competitive in our ports, because if we must be the hub that we want to be. So how do we think, if you are talking to the minister now on port efficiency, so what do you expect to see?
Well, you know, the first, and that's a very important question. I think Nigeria really should be striving to be in the hub in Africa, because if you look at the volume of trade for Nigeria alone, it's substantial when you compare to other port cities. However, Benin and Togo do more trade than us. So you have to ask yourself the question, why? Number one is the political commitment and the political will of government to have a clear strategic vision that is clear to every single person in the value chain of the port industry, to understand where they fall in as part of that solution landscape, but more importantly, the role that the central government has to play in communicating through actions and policy that the right things will be done to give the confidence to investors to continue to invest. That's one end. The second end is we need to find a way to support our indigenous shipping industry to be able to grow, to support indigenous port users, to be able to facilitate trade through the ports, particularly, by the way, exports. Because right now, Nigeria is in dire economic straits. And the question always is, what do we do to sort of diversify away from oil? What do we do to increase the level of trade that we do with other countries, to increase our balance of trade and obviously return more effects to the country to be able to bolster our currency? What that means, therefore, is that the government itself needs to be very direct in making sure that the way it engages with industry on the policy level, on infrastructure investment level, on even how process works, is such that it enables the industry to thrive, but also it solicits feedback regularly enough to understand what is new that is happening around technology, particularly green technology, which we have the option to use around our port ecosystem and our port infrastructure to enable us to be competitive and ahead of the curve and attract that investment to come here. That's what I would advise the minister to focus on. Then, of course, it's about improving compliance, making sure that Nigerian ports are compliant, because the route to efficiency is compliance. I talked about the importance of transparency. If I don't know what to expect and I come to your port and every single time I come the rules are different, it creates significant risk. And that's risk to trade. That's risk to people choosing to do business here. That's also risk to export. So these are things we need to address and manage as a country, so that those that want to do business who are Nigerians and those who are not Nigerians that choose to do business with Nigeria see Nigeria as the kind of market where they can thrive and where their investment is safe.
Another leg of what you said earlier was technology. What role would technology play because we have in smart ports everywhere
Mhm.
where we have cargo clearance in 24 hours, but Nigeria is still doing 1 week, 10 days, or even more.
Mhm.
So how do we begin to deploy the technology to ensure that we have a competitive port or maybe port efficiency?
Well, let me start by saying this. There's possibly a claim that if you look at clearance efficiency, Lagos is a little better than the eastern ports. So we can claim that. However, in terms to answer the question more directly around how do you inculcate infrastructure, the customs CG, very recently I read, said something very important, that he began to invest in infrastructure to find a way to improve and also meet his own set
IGL.
standards. Yes, IGL was set standards around how we should do things. The importance of technology is to automate processes. And the point of automating processes and how it matters to efficiency is, number one, like you talked about, the easy passage of goods and the scanning of goods. It happens a lot faster and seamlessly. Second, it removes the human element, which often can mess around with the process, which is part of the challenge we have when we talk about lack of compliance at the ports on the agency side, or even as far as corruption, for instance, where the human influence often distorts the process or even distorts how systems work, right? And we see that not just in the port industry, but in other areas. You know, like for instance, the Minister of Interior recently said, in spite of all the improvements in technology, the human element continues to hold back the time frame for application and receipt of passports.
Okay, that brings me to this question to say, then what strategies can we put in place to be able to drive compliance, to eliminate these human interferences that bring about corruption?
So one of them is automation for sure. When you automate, you reduce the risk substantially. The second thing that we must do if we want to reduce corruption, but I would rather say improve compliance, because corruption comes in different ways. Corruption isn't even down to abuse of process, it's also corruption, right? So one of the great things that the Nigerian government had done as part of the ongoing port reform process, which our organization is supporting the federal government through its agencies to deploy, is the Nigerian Port Process Manual. The Port Process Manual is part of setting the standards, and the importance of that standard is that for the private sector and also for government and for those that wish to perform a role of an oversight function of the efficiency of the entire industry, which the media is a part of, is that if you know the clear standards according to MPPM, time frame for onboarding vessels to do checks, time frame for clearing cargo, time frame for returns of cargo, time frame for returning money, the role of Shippers Council, the role of Customs, Immigration, or other agencies. Those standards create essentially the rules by which everybody must play the game. Because if I have certainty that it takes 48 hours to clear through this process, at least I make time for it as an importer or whatever, or even a freight forwarder or a customs licensed agent. I know exactly what to expect. But the problem is that those rules have been well done by the government and is enforced as we currently speak. We need to make sure that it is seamlessly implemented across all the ports in the country. Now, second to that is this. We need to also have an accountability mechanism that makes it easy that where there is a deviance to those set standards or where there's a deviance to the automation process that's in place, we ensure that there's a quick response. And that requires an ombudsman. When the Nigerian Shippers Council, which is leading the federal government's effort alongside ICPC and other Nigerian agencies, started working on the port reform process under the with the Secretariat as TUGA, the Technical Unit on Governance and Anti-Corruption. When that entire instrument was created and they talked about what would it take, that accountability mechanism was handed over as a port economic regulator to the Nigerian Shippers Council so that they can quickly respond to complaints and ensure that efficiency. That is fundamental. Now, in addition to that, we now need to have that grievance reporting mechanism as part of the trust building in the industry around driving efficiency. So in a case where you have a problem, whether it's the fault of the port user or whether it's the misdeed or the lack of competence or whatever, however I want to describe it, which I've heard many people discuss, of the agency responsible, whether directly or indirectly for whatever the reason may be, that grievance reporting mechanism produces a solution that is in real time, because part of the challenge we face around the cost of doing business is that there is no real-time solution sometimes, which often then leads to the risk that the person's cargo can get locked up for months and months and months on end and then get sold off. You see what I mean?
Well, okay, well said. So let's say this directly. Look at the impact of corruption in our ports. Trickle down to the common man on the streets. So how do you think, or what strategies do you think are responsible, or how then we can prefer solutions that can be able to curb I'm not saying that eradicate it entirely, but curb the level of corruption that is seen, looking at the impact it has.
So let's talk impact for a minute. If every Nigerian understands, particularly every port official understands that every time you delay a vessel, it can cost that vessel anything between $40,000 and $150,000 between coming and leaving Nigerian waters. If you understand that that is the cost of doing business, if you understand also that the shipping companies that they will not absorb that cost. Instead, they will pass it back to us. They'll pass it back to our port users, our shippers, to make sure that they recover their costs. So what does that mean? In the middle of this economic crisis we're living in, it means it adds to the cost of goods for the end user.
Yeah.
So that has inflationary implications for the wider economy as a whole. And guess what? Even for the person who is creating delays at the ports, thinking that I can gain something now, but the consequence is that you pay it back later.
Yes.
Through the cost of
because
goods.
You're going to the market.
You're going back to the market. Your wife has to go back to the market to try and make that investment. Your child has to go to school. They have to access healthcare. So all those things cost more. So we frame the problem. What is the solution? Like I said, number one, those standards must be clear. Because when you see, the biggest problem a lot of Nigerians have is that they do not know what the rules are. So if you don't know what the rules are, anybody can bamboozle you. That is the thing. So people must be very, have to invest the time and the resource required to ensure that every single person within their company, for those that do import clearance or whatever the case may be, or even those that handle vessel clearance processes, must make sure that they understand what the rules are. Because when you know the rule, if they say information is key, if somebody wants to tell you something that's deviant to the process, you say, excuse me, this is what MPPM says. I expect this to happen this way. I know that in Nigeria we say, but that's not how things work because you're at the mercy of the agent. But why don't you try and enforce your right and see what happens? Second to that, in enforcing your rights, is that need for that grievance reporting platform that provides real-time solution and also builds trust back into the arrangement, which is what we have lacking right now. So those that will be cynical and skeptical about, I don't want to challenge a port official, I just give him something, everybody goes their way, must understand that if you do not take the stand by using the existing help desk set up by the federal government and implemented in partnership with the MACN, and actually report a vessel clearance challenge, for instance, that you have, how would you know if the solutions will work for you, will reduce the cost of you doing business? Outside oil and gas, we import everything.
Yeah.
So we are so dependent on imports. So you must protect that sector.
To reduce the cost. With our life.
With our life. And equally, in so doing, make sure that we don't bring in inflation to our country. So that's the reason, that will be one key way, I think, we can address the issue of corruption and increase compliance, because that's really what the energy should be focused on.
I must say that question was thoroughly dealt with, but we are due for a break. When we return, we'll be looking at the efficiency and effectiveness of the SOP, but that will be after this short break. Please stay with us.
Africa needs its own storytellers, people who understand the continent because they're from it. People who know that news is more than just a conversation starter, it's our stories. Because these stories run deeper than headlines and segments. It's about digging deeper to get the facts and telling the human side of every single story, not just the echoes from foreign headlines and perspectives. It's time to take back our narratives and share them in our voices. The birth of Africa's New Age reporting, and this is where it begins, right here at News Central TV, with stories that put Africa first.
If you are just joining us, this is Maritime Radio, and I still have with me Emmanuel Bosah. He is the Program Director, Convention on Business Integrity. Before we went on that break, you talked so much about the impact of corruption in our ports, and we really needed that talk to be able to know that how bad the impact could be on our ports. So we move to the efficiency and effectiveness of the standard processing operating procedures in our ports. How do we begin to arrive at that?
So, there's something very important. As I was preparing for this, one of the questions I asked myself was, what are the possible challenges that we have faced that SOPs have helped us solve? based on the project that I was describing earlier. First was
Still on the data, right?
Yeah, it's the duplication of function, for instance. The one great thing that the Nigerian government did, you see, and I think it's important that we give great credence. It was at the initial stage called the Ministry of Transportation, now of course called Marine and Blue Economy, and also Nigerian Shippers Council, Nigerian Ports Authority, NEMASA, all the agencies, and then led, essentially coordinated by this technical unit on governance and anti-corruption, which is TUGA, anti-corruption reforms, I beg your pardon, which is TUGA. And what they looked at was working alongside the anti-corruption agencies, working with the port sector regulators, was to identify where are the duplications. How do we streamline these duplications as part of that pursuit of efficiency? And what that created was this NPPM, the Nigerian Port Process Manual, which now distills per step. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. Everybody knows where this person's function ends and my own begins. So around the issue of standards, I don't think Nigeria struggles with the challenge of standards. Nigeria struggles with the challenge of port users and port regulators understanding those standards in a way that facilitates trade.
So how do we begin to convey?
So that is a function of communication. That's a function of training and retraining. That is a function of making sure that where we see deviances to standards, we do not...
No, because why I asked that question is because it's critical. Because if they don't understand, we still come, no matter how much data, no matter how much solutions you are providing, if this is not addressed, knowing your functions, because the major thing we have is multiplicity of functions. You find out that so many agencies doing the same thing at the port, constant confusion and all that. So we need to address that. They have to know that, okay, this is where this ends and what is the right of this. So that communication is imperative to whatever solution that we are providing here.
Can I put it this way? I wouldn't say there's a multiplicity of function. I would say that people stepping on the territories of other people. That's how I'll place it, if you don't mind. That will be my position.
Okay.
Because do you know the one thing the Nigerian government needs to address? And this was something I heard quite recently, and I thought that was so critical as part of the communications we must put out for Nigerians to consider, is that we mustn't turn our port regulators, just like every other agency, into revenue-generating agencies. They must first of all perform their function, and the government has a responsibility to make sure that those agencies function as best as possible so that we don't degrade the integrity of our business environment. That is very key. The reason why you made that statement, I believe, that's just my own position, is that because everybody's so keen to raise revenue, they're trying to identify points of weakness in the process, in meeting in compliance by some of the port users. And the consequence of that, of course, everyone's not looking to pinpoint a mistake so they can be able to earn some revenue on that. But if we focused on what we're supposed to do, if every agency focused on what it's supposed to do, you'll find that there isn't that much duplication.
Okay, aside from increasing compliance to reduce corruption in the port, another thing I want us to have in this conversation is seafarers, the challenges they face, and how we can be able to, aside from the challenges, how can we look into the opportunities that these seafarers bring that we can transform for economic gain?
Oh, that's an excellent way to posit that, and that's what I wanted to talk about. For me, when you talk about seafarers, I think we should escape the conversation around challenges. They face challenges every day as Nigerians, but the opportunities should be the driving force, should be the hook for government, private sector to listen, for Nigerians to listen and want to take action. What does that actually mean? Philippines, one of the greatest exports of the Philippines is seafarers. It nets their economy billions in dollars in terms of remittances that go back. And there's been a consistent conversation through NEMASA, through other institutions around how do we improve documentation of seafarers. The biggest challenge Nigerian seafarers face abroad, if I can say that, is the trustworthiness of their certifications. The inability of seafarers to be able to get NEMASA to certify that their certification that they got in Nigeria after training that's well set up by NEMASA itself is completed, and they go abroad to seek work and they apply back to get certification and they don't get responses. And the agencies that want to place them with companies, with shipping companies, cannot place them because they cannot get timely certification of their documentation that they brought with them. What needs to happen is we need to be concerted in our understanding of the levers we can pretty much draw on to bring immediate gains for our economy, because that's the responsibility. And that means we need to overhaul. And I don't believe it will take that much to overhaul, because the process of training and certification is already in place and is of the same global standard as you would expect anywhere else. It's just to make sure that we have an automated system of registration, of confirmation of someone's completion of that training process and the certification process. That's all we need. That's a starting point. It's not the entire solution, but it's a starting point.
So the FDI part?
The FDI part is substantial. If we are serious about tackling the significant unemployment problems we have in this country, which has consequences for national security around crime, which has consequences around the well-being, the health of our young people, and then we want to earn FDI, it's fundamental that we prepare and train and encourage. I know there are several maritime institutions that are being built now. That is something we must encourage. We must make sure the quality of the standards of that education does not diminish. We must make sure, in addition to that, that when children finish school, we have planned the opportunities for them to do their technical training, their practical training, so that they also are qualified in line with any other person anywhere else in the world. The same training that they should get. It should be something we must be deliberate about, and that must be based on the understanding that it pays back. That investment will pay back. And it pays back because when you're able to create a repository through which your seafarers can find work abroad, because Nigerians are hardworking, Nigerians are highly intelligent, Nigerians do not have the opportunities to live their best dream. That's what it is. That's the challenge, that gap. So if that repository, people are able to go there and collect seafarers and use them, they will remit a lot of their foreign currency earnings back into this country, which we know we desperately need to be able to bolster our reserves and also defend our currency, which we must do, whether we like it or not, as best as we can, for as long as we can, until we can be able to have independent domestic growth that can carry the economy.
Time is not always our friend when we are talking important things like this. So our next export should be seafarers, right?
Seafarers.
So it's been Emmanuel Bosah. He is the Program Director, Convention on Business Integrity. I must thank you most kindly for your thoughts, your time, and particularly the solutions that you've provided around compliance, port efficiency, and exporting. Another export, then another export we have.
Absolutely.
The seafarers.
We need to export everything.
Yes, you have to export everything and collect money back.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you like money. I think I like more. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it.
Take care.
And that's our show this week. I hope this episode has been able to bring to you how government can leverage the opportunities seen in the Nigerian seafarers for foreign direct investment. Join us every week on Maritime Read as we explore potential that will ensure development of the maritime sector in Africa. You can also explore the latest in global and local maritime news, plus industry insights right here. I'm Nneoma Obi-Asualo. Many thanks for your time and see you again next week.